I don't think all affirmations work because we are future thinking. We're always thinking in the future. I will be. Well, you're telling yourself that at some point you will be this, but you're not that now. And again, things slow down in this physical world to where you have to understand thinking yourself in the reality is present moment. We get into the present moment. All life occurs presently. The past is the past. It always will be. The future is undecided and only occurs in the present moment choices that create our future. So it's a deep spiritual / metaphysical answer to your question of who am I? But it's one of the greatest questions of mankind, of humankind. Sit there and think for yourself. How would you define yourself? That might be where you're at in terms of physical human existence, or looking at energy, consciousness, and spirit and saying we're all of those things. But what does that mean for you and who you are?
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Ken Hannaman, who is here to share his book, Ungraduated, Finding Your Why and Dropping Out of Outdated Belief Systems. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Ken's book, and it's by Gabby Rodriguez. Throughout life, we are put into boxes to categorize how people see and know us. This is how stereotypes originate, because people would rather read the labels on the box instead of taking a look and seeing what's inside. It's human nature, and it allows us to conserve brain power. It's like when we finish someone else's sentence just so we can kind of move along. We're not actually listening. We're putting things in boxes and conserving our brain power. Can't learn that way. Before we continue, let's review last week's action step, which was to make time for stillness and experience being. Super powerful, and I've been practicing it ever since Udo reminded me. He's coming back to go even deeper on the subject, so stay tuned. I know I'm excited for our next conversation. I want to share a short story this week. It's a Native American story about 2 wolves who live inside each human being. One thrives on love, possibility, hope, and all that's good, while the other is a well of negativity, prone to fighting with others and hurting others, and generally at odds with the world. An elder Indian teaches his grandson about the 2 wolves and how they fight each other. The grandson asks, "Which wolf will win?" The grandfather answers, "The one you feed." Who are you feeding? Comes back to our programming and the thoughts in our head. We need to clean those up. You get to choose. Feed the wolf that you want to win. I have to say, the world is pretty connected, and so are many of the people who come on this podcast. Our guest today was an introduction from Tommy Breedlove, who's been on a couple episodes in the past. He knew we would be on the same page, and so he connected us. That's the way life works. Connect people you think may get along or support each other. You never know where it goes. Ken introduced me to a new book that I'm going to read. That lets me take another step forward. We're going to discuss many of the topics which we have chatted about before. You can see how he integrates them into his life. Ken Hannaman is an executive leader in the restaurant industry with the responsibility of 700 plus restaurants. In addition to his corporate responsibility, he's also an author, writer, and mindset coach. He's the husband to his wife and best friend, Crystal, having enjoyed life together for 20 plus years. Neither of them have navigated on traditional terms. Together, they have marched against social norms and have forged a life well lived on their own terms, defined through them and away from societal labels. Ken has a real life, nothing to everything story. It's been through his relationships and the many different levels he's held in corporate career that he's had the ability to reflect on what in life made him successful. Having met, coached, and observed the lives and careers of thousands of different individuals, Ken has come to the realization that happiness, purpose, health, and wellness, along with personal and professional success, are all the result of mindset and belief systems. We often allow our lives to be defined by others through education, religion, governments, and other organizations that indoctrinate us into a belief system that is best lived one way, their way. Ken's going to help us find their way through their why. It just requires a little bit of ungraduation from the old views of a bygone era and the ability to see with new eyes how we shape our lives for the better or for the worse through our belief systems. Through his life experiences and rewiring his own programming, Ken's broken free of these outdated belief systems that were holding him back all his life from his passions and desires. His life well lived is a result of his own inner work, reflection, and real-life learnings that he hopes will inspire you to discover that the lives they so desire are not in their heads, but mostly in their heads. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Ken Hannaman. It's great to have you join us today.
Pleasure to be here with you, Rocky.
I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Growing up for me was a challenge. So I come from a background that mostly knew lack and want and desire. So not unlike many people in this world, unfortunately, they are exposed to that kind of environment first. And it was the biggest challenge for me understanding what money was, because in my career, in my life early on, it was money is hard to attain. Money is hard to wrap your mind around. It's elusive. And then if you do have it, well, what if you're a bad person because you have too much of it? And we can get into all these different topics later, but in terms of religion and how I was brought up and raised by parents that only wanted the best for me, they didn't know what they didn't know. And they didn't have a whole lot growing up. And that was brought back into my life as well, too. So that was my first impressions of this elusive thing called money, and how do we attract more of it into our lives. And as you work through those thought patterns and those belief systems, the very first thing that's usually ingrained in you is if you want something badly enough, you have to go work very hard for it, which I most certainly did. But I began to learn too later on in life that it's not always about the hard work aspect. It's how you think about money. But for me, that early on process, Rocky, was very limiting in terms of that mindset of money and that lack, and trying to learn how to create abundance. It was a challenge for me to start off my life with.
So how did you break through?
The biggest change was learning that we are in control of our own lives, that external versus internal aspect of life. I think a lot of society, myself included, are raised to think that things happen to us versus for us, and that external component. So as I began to pay attention and internalize a lot of learning and development, the mindset started to shift that it is your actions that you take. It is your limitations that you place upon yourself, the negative self-talk that you put upon yourself, that can make massive differences in your life if you know how to reframe those mindsets. So yes, I put in a lot of hard work. I went through a very, I'd say 5 or 6 year phase of my early 20s to late 20s of 80 hours plus a week as I quote unquote established myself in life, put in the front end effort, and began to attain some reward for that. So I could connect the dots that, hey, if you work hard, you can make money. And then the next mindset shifts needed to occur of you can't work hard forever. And I do think that we're entrapped in the mindset that it's a great thing, but the American dream teaches about the grind and the everyday work and the hard work that you have to instill. But I think that that's a trap as well, too, to think that you only have to work hard to make money and that you can't be smarter about it. So those changes began to evolve for me in my life. And I began to do a lot of personal growth and learning and exploration into more of that mindset piece that I had to shed all of those limitations and almost recreate myself into the person that I am now. And I'm still constantly evolving through as well, too.
And it is a process that you continually go through. Were there any other limiting beliefs from childhood?
Yes, there's many of them. And we could talk spirituality, we can talk religion, we can talk health. I had a lot of those beliefs too. And I'll go to the health aspect first. I think one of the biggest limitations that I had to face was, hey, you're born this way and you're stuck with the genetic code that your parents have. And if you have the quote unquote fat gene, or if you've got whatever physical ailments, that you're stuck with it. And that was an epiphany for me as well, too, to realize that modern day science is proving all of those theories incorrect, that the body changes continuously and the mind is connected through that process, that DNA is replicated through your DNA streams. So you're not born with the same set of genes that you have at 20 and 30 and 40. You're constantly ever changing. So you can think yourself, you have to take action, but you can think yourself into habits that just reaffirm those limiting life beliefs. So as I got into my 20s, I had this belief of as you age, everybody around me, they get married, they end up putting on weight. I did the same things, would make excuses, of course, on how to live a more unhealthy life, because that's what I was used to. Everybody around me would say, well, I guess it's just a freshman 15 and so on and so forth. One day you wake up and you've put on 30, 40, 50, 60 pounds, which was the case for me. I was a pretty slender kid, as most of us are, not all, but I wasn't big boned by any stretch. And as my life moved on, I followed along the same belief systems that this is just how life works. And I think we're beginning to learn through a lot of the modern science and technologies that we can redefine the aging process. We can redefine our health sets with how we want to live and the action steps that we take that form our beliefs, which do form our actions. And the one misconception, I think, is that you can't just think everything into existence. I'm a big believer of energy and energy consciousness and how the thought and the mind-body connection works. We can get into that if you want to. But the bottom line here is you do have to take action, but it's the underlying thought processes that allow you the excuses, if you will, in terms of what choices you make or don't make. And in this ever insistent, I want it now society, people get frustrated because the changes don't occur every day. We just live in a physical world where things are slowed down and take more time. But as you can relate to, and so can the listeners, you wake up one day and wonder, how did I gain all this weight? It happens slowly over time by your thoughts and by your belief systems and how you reaffirm those actions. So that was just one example of one of the limitations I had to shed, is that we're not born and then stay that way. We choose it into existence every single day.
That is very true. The cells in our body are constantly being recreated and removed, and new ones are coming in. And so every year you've got essentially a whole new body, and you have the ability to rebuild it. And
Correct.
Your environment and our thoughts and our foods all signal different genes to turn on and off. And it's up to you to figure out for you, because we all react differently, how to turn those on and off properly and how to make those changes. You also mentioned spirituality. I'd love for you to kind of give us a little feedback on that as well.
Yeah. So my story, my parents, I was born into a religious family. I was baptized Catholic, but raised in a Christian faith. And my mother was constantly in search of the alignment that would work for our belief system. So I was taken out of the Catholic Church at a young age, probably about 4 or 5, and then became a member of a Presbyterian church. That lasted a few years, was taken out of that. And then we started going to an Episcopalian church. That lasted for a few years, and then it became Seventh-day Adventist. So I constantly ask myself, what is it? And this all occurred from 4 to age 12 or 13. So in my adolescence and youth, I'm wondering why all these different religions and why all these different spiritual beliefs and different sectors, if you will, of Christianity. They were all the same thing, but why were these different belief systems there? So in my mother's never-ending quest to do her very best to raise her 2 children, we were in a divorced family, and my father and her split at about the age of 5 years old. So she did her very best to instill good values in us, but I don't think she had all the answers, and she was searching for the answers herself. So whenever I would seek to understand and ask questions such as, does God really care what religion you're a part of? If God is good and all omnipresent, loving of all, well, then why would a loving God choose some and not others? And I know that these are questions that probably many people across the world ask and may not have all the answers to, but I know one thing for me, hearing because I said so, or that's just the way that it is, didn't quite sit well for me. So it became this lifelong mission of mine to try to find my own way and understand what spirituality meant for me. And I'll never forget, upon meeting my then girlfriend, eventual fiance, and now wife, that I naturally, intrinsically wanted to say to her, what's your relationship with God like? She wasn't so much a church-going person. I was raised to be a church-going person. And I said, aren't you worried that if you die one day, you're not going to be saved? And her answer to me was, I have a perfect connection with God. Me and God are just fine how we are. I don't need to go to church. I don't need to have a certain kind of religious sector to belong to in order to feel like I'm a good person. And for a while, that didn't sit right. I'm saying, well, that's not how I was taught. So we'd get into these back and forth, I wouldn't say arguments, but discussions around what personal spirituality went. Well, she was years ahead of her time, Rocky, and she's tended to kind of be that way, as she's my yin to my yang, and we definitely counteract each other and balance each other well. But I had to kind of live through her in those conversations of what she really meant by that. And through my own research and study, it began to make a lot more sense that spirituality is a personal connection that works for you, in my opinion. And I don't think I have it all figured out, but I think that connection to God is sought through your own internal work. And I call it doing the work. And so a lot of different scriptures that teach that if you're talking about a Christian sense, to find the kingdom of heaven, thou must go within. And you have all these different parts of the Bible. It talks about being born again as well, too, that I never understood. And a lot of churches say, well, born again means being baptized. And I'm like, well, isn't that a human ritual? I mean, what does that human ritual do? Aren't we the same born again if we see spirituality through our own way and are opening our hearts and minds to that higher level consciousness that can fill us full of that energy and joy? We don't need a human to necessarily do that for us. So this is an ever-going constant evolution for me too, of what it means to live a spiritual life. I just think it's very different, and I'm okay with it being different for everyone, versus having to fit into these neat little boxes, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because it kind of leads to my next question, which is, why do we put labels on people?
It's one of the best questions of all time. I think that we're so used to putting ourselves into categories that feel right. We are a tribal society. Humankind as a species likes to fit and belong. And how our society works is we have to label things to kind of make sense of them all in terms of our job titles, our names. But when it comes to other labels, we have an ego. And I think it does come back to the ego piece, at least in terms of religion and spirituality. People want to do right by others, and they're well-intended when they, at least I think for the most part, when they come to you and want to have a conversation around your spirituality and try to help you conform to their belief. They're trying to draw you in to the same feeling of, hey, this is my tribe, and I want you to belong to my tribe. And that's a big reason why I think we put labels on things, is we're trying to fit together. And that's the ego, which we're wired from hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's been labeled and talked as the reptilian part of our brain that was meant to keep us comfortable, meant to keep us safe. And fitting within that safeness and security is knowing you have others around you. So it gets very deep and very, very philosophical. But I think, to try to answer your question to the best of my ability, we label because we identify with, and we like to fit in with the things that we fit in with and agree with. And the more that we can get people to agree with us, we feel that instant gratification, that ego being fed of, yes, I am right. Somebody else sees it my way too. And I think that's where a lot of it begins. And we're trying, I think, to evolve consciously to get above those labels. It's okay to function with them, but look beyond them and not feed the ego intrinsically through those labels and that belonging. We can find it in different ways.
That makes a lot of sense. And, there was a time and point where you needed to be part of a tribe. In today's world, we don't rely on anyone. We rely on Amazon. Just the other day, it's like, in the past, when you needed sugar, you went to your neighbor and said, can I borrow a cup of sugar or an egg? Or those types of things were normal. I don't know the last time someone asked me for a cup of sugar. Now, my neighbors do come over and ask for spices every so often or something different. And we've actually built a community around our neighborhood where people do help each other and we all know who each other are. And, we break bread together all the time. But you have to build that tribe and you have to be intentional with that. And I don't think a lot of people put the time and effort into that. It's funny, when you go to buy a house, you look at the house, you don't look at the neighborhood. But the neighborhood, especially if you have kids, really becomes a big impact on who you are and what's going on in your day, unless you're a hermit. And then again, I don't know that that's the way to live either.
Yeah, and it's okay to not agree with everything. I'm not an advocate of just say yes and look past everything. I'm an advocate of debate and conversation, healthy conversation, open-mindedness, and the removal of ego. I think our egos today are fueled by all the different polarizing topics that are set in front of us. And I think part of this labeling, we have to demystify the fact that it's meant to keep us in a box, I think. And it's okay to feel comfortable and agree with people and feel like you're in that clique or in that tribe. But so many problems can be solved, obviously, if we can evolve consciously past those things and resist the urge to make people become like we are and come from a place of curiosity first, being critical second. I think it's the best practice that people can ever give, is to seek first to be curious and critical second. Listen more for points of views. And if the person that you're talking to is not coming from a place of logic, common sense that makes sense to you, you can always agree to disagree, but there's no need for hatred. There's no need for a lot of the anger and resentment and frustration that comes out of the society that we're living in today. But again, there's a lot of polarizing avenues that are out there that are making money off of this. And that's a whole different problem. All the major networks and different agencies, they get fueled by ratings and they get fueled by the attention that people give it. And if we stop giving it attention, a lot of those things go away, I think. Not always easy to do, but something to work towards.
We got rid of cable.
It's one of the best decisions you probably made. There's a lot of good things on TV still too, or streaming services. It's not all bad, but when people really do dial in, it's that old adage of, hey, you really are what you consume. And that's all things. That's food, that's media, that's information, content. You become those things. I teach that you're not your thoughts. You are not thoughts, but your thoughts do create the individual that you become. Your belief system is created through your thoughts and the everyday actions that you take to back that up. So if you want to delabel yourself, start with some of the things that you're consuming and always trying to find that tribal instinct in to say, I belong here. It doesn't make you any different if you remove yourself from that. You're still an individual as also a part of a collective that's called human. And there's so much enlightenment, so much lifting of the weight whenever you begin to perceive things that way.
That is very true. And it kind of ties into our next question, because I think people need to define who they are. And I think the biggest question is, how do you define I am? And what does that kind of mean to you?
One of my absolute favorite questions. And it took me a long time to get to this point because of labels. And if somebody asks you, who are you? We always start with, well, I'm Ken Hannaman. I'm a husband. I am a father. I am an executive, or I am XYZ, which are our human functions of how we operate in society. Now, I'm going to get a little bit deep on you here, and I hope your audience enjoys this. This is where my mind goes. I can't help it. I'm always seeking truth, and truth, I think, comes from experience. So you can get told something that sounds like you kind of agree with, but until you experience it, it doesn't really become your truth. At least in my experience, it doesn't. So in my experience, what made the most sense to me as far as who I am a consciousness that embodies a physical vessel that is experiencing a physical life. But I am not Ken Hannaman. I am not this body that sits in front of you right now. I believe at our essence and our core that we are energy, spirit, consciousness that is having a human experience. Now, some people may say that sounds too woo-woo, that sounds too metaphysical. Science is proving this stuff. And while there's never been any photo evidence of a soul on an X-ray, we can absolutely point to the fact that consciousness exists, energy and protons and neutrons and electrons, when observed, behave differently from a conscious perspective. So the mind very well may be just a wonderful radio tower in your head that is programmed to help the body process and function and do. But it could be consciousness that creates the interaction that forms the person into who he or she or whatever we are is and becomes. And that's the power of choice, I think, and observation as far as what we are putting into our lives to become what we want to be. So when I say that I am, what follows after that is so powerful because I think it does program you into the person that you are trying unconsciously, subconsciously, or consciously to become. All of this happens at the same time, whether you realize it or not. And that's why the negative self-talk, the things that you say to yourself that are, negative put downs that you don't like about yourself. Use the example of I am too fat. I am not smart enough. I am not wealthy, or I am poor. I am in more need. When you think thoughts of lack and disempowerment, you get more of those things. Whether you can think of it as an energy connection, such as law of attraction conversation, or if you just are not seeing the other things because you're proving yourself into existence through choosing to observe the things that you're telling yourself about yourself. So I believe that those words, I am, are just so super important. Anytime you catch yourself saying I am, think about what comes next. Is it abundance thinking, or is it lack and disempowering? And that's where people can take some very monumental, powerful steps. We can get into affirmations and whatnot. I don't think all affirmations work because we are future thinking. We're always thinking in the future. I will be. Well, you're telling yourself that at some point you will be this, but you're not that now. And again, things slow down in this physical world to where you have to understand thinking yourself into reality is present moment. We get into the present moment. All life occurs presently. The past is the past. It always will be. The future is undecided and only occurs in the present moment choices that create our future. So it's a deep spiritual / metaphysical answer to your question of who am I? But it's one of the greatest questions of mankind, of humankind. Sit there and think for yourself. How would you define yourself? That might be where you're at in terms of physical human existence, or looking at energy, consciousness, and spirit and saying we're all of those things. But what does that mean for you and who you are?
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner, and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. I pay attention occasionally to what people say. And when you do that, they say things under their breath, or they just say things they throw something out. And it's like, oh, wow. I hear them a lot in the money script because that's my focus. And you'll hear people say, I wish I could go on vacation, or that must be nice. Like, it's just outside of their belief system. And if you actually listen to the words people use and pay attention, they'll tell you who they are. And it's quite interesting to see that when that happens.
They don't even know that they're doing it a lot of times, and it's to no fault of their own. And I don't say it to put myself or anybody else in this conversation on a pedestal. It's just, I believe that we're all at the unique place in life of where we're meant to be. And there's no wrong or right. So anybody who's listening to this, there's no pedestal underneath me. I'm still a work in progress, and I'm constantly aiming to be a lifelong learner. I've also just learned to take action and take the practices of what I've spent the better part of 10 to 15 years learning and put into place. But there's no judgment from it on my end. I want to help people realize they have more power in their minds and consciousness energy than what they're giving themselves credit for. And that I do think that this physical reality, although slowed down, works very much on an energetic level in terms of how you think you become, just in small little incremental steps in this physical, more dense reality that we occupy and live within. So it is just this realization of catching yourself in moments and realizing that your subconscious and unconscious are liken them to the software that runs behind the background on your computer. It keeps all the programs running. So when you press buttons, the things work how they're supposed to. But the programs are always running. You just don't always know it. That's the unconscious and subconscious. And that comes from experience and belief systems that you've told yourself over time in your life. That's the epiphany that we have to realize.
It is. And we had Cliff Ravenscraft on once, and he called me out and he goes, did you just hear that? You said I am, and you defined yourself. And I was like, yeah, I missed that. Thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah, it's how a lot of those books like Think and Grow Rich were created. And we have all these money affirmations and realizations. They're not just great books. They are written in principle of truths around those elements that, again, I think people, they hurt themselves a little bit by saying, that's not true. Just give yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of humility and say, let me just take a look. And if it doesn't make sense, doesn't resonate with you, that's fine too. But my mind always says, I will seek with curiosity first and make my own determination second. If I wasn't open to these things, I don't believe I'd be as successful or where I'm at in my life right now, because I may not have been awakened to these things that are happening that we have control over. And again, I'm not perfect. We're all a work in progress, but I'm better for knowing it, I think, than I am not knowing it.
So very true. So we're here today to talk about your book. What inspired you to write the book, Ungraduated, Finding Your Why and Dropping Out of Outdated Belief Systems?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's become my new passion in life. I shouldn't say I never thought. I always knew I'd write. I just knew it would come when the time was right for me. I'm always passionate about telling stories, and decided to take the proper action steps about 2 years ago to begin writing this book. A lot of things happened 2 years ago, almost to the day, actually. It's, as of recording this, it's March 4th, and we're almost 2 years out from the whole COVID outbreak and society's shutting down and all these things happening in life that were confusing for people. And for me, I guess it was the right trigger to say it's time to start sharing a lot of the lifelong lessons that have kept me calm, free of fear. I'm not saying I was totally uncertain and that I didn't have worries, but being more calm and handling things a little different than how I saw people around me handling them. I said, you know what, this is my sign to write the book. I'm 40 years old. I've practiced a lot of this stuff for 10 to 15 years. It's become my truth. So shame on me if I don't share it. If it helps one person or 100 or 1,000 or 1 million or 10 million or more, let the universe decide where it needs to go. My job is to put it out there. So with a lot of purposeful intent, the book wasn't hard to write. It was the process of getting it out there. I had so much information saying, how do I condense it down to one book? But Ungraduated is about finding your way through your why and removing outdated belief systems. There is a pun in there on me, the word ungraduated. I'm a high school dropout. So many people in my life were like, what are you doing? You're smart. Why would you walk away from high school, go into the restaurant business? What are you thinking? My entire life has been unconventional. From that moment, even going to my childhood, it was unconventional, but getting that high school dropout label, getting a GED, continuing on the restaurant business, not going to college, not having children, everything has been unconventional for me and my wife, quite frankly. So it came down to, society has us again with these labels and in this box, and they're trying to fit us into it. And not all of it's bad. Not all education, not all societal belief systems and communities are bad. Our parents try to help us, but there's so many things that are placed on top of us that aren't our truths, that we adopt as if they are, because we're also caught up in the rat race, Rocky. We're caught up in the everyday, got to go grind, got to make things happen. And I think that we are very reliant upon other people's information to decide what's right for us. So we listen to the different systems, if you will, of grow up, go to school, learn, graduate, go into college, buy a house, get married, have kids, not exactly in that order. And then we're put into that box. And a lot of us are in constant search of happiness and meaning. And we're thinking, hey, we've done this thing. Where's this happiness thing at? Where's this key to success in all things? And I've learned that it's through your own internalization, your own inner work, that you find these answers. So Ungraduated was written to help people find purpose, but also see what they don't see and question what they may not have questioned about their life and their beliefs. Again, to not say that they're all bad, but to challenge your own labels. See if you're sabotaging yourself or holding yourself back from having more empowerment, more freedom, more success, happiness, whatever it is that's important to you, because it's not always money. But if you want to do big, grandiose things and make world impact, the world runs on money currently, even though it's digits on a computer screen somewhere, and it's not even that, physical cash stuff anymore. Even it has changed and is kind of a myth in a certain way. But it does come down to finding your own purpose for yourself through your own eyes and not that of society to figure out what happiness looks like for you. So that's why I wrote the book, because it's working for me. And I wanted to share my story in hopes that it helps others frame some new perspectives that may challenge their thoughts and also add value and impact in their lives.
Any comments on what we call education versus learning?
Yes, I very much have plenty of comments around that. And let me try to start it off with, in school, I was kind of an oddball. Like, I loved science, hated math. People were like, well, don't those two things kind of go hand in hand? I used to dread math, but would love science class. I also used to like learning about new processes and what's new in current events and what's happening. Yet, because society has, again, tried to make things easier for people, and we're in this constant rat race world, children go to schools, and in order for the schools to function how they need to function, everything is placed within a certain curriculum. All kids learn the same things, whether they like it or not. They're also given their labels as being smart or not, or articulate or not, IQs, SATs, you name it. They're given every single test in the book. And if it doesn't fit the system that they're operating in, that label is placed on them, which is it can be empowering for a lot who happen to fit the mold and do well within that framework. But for anybody who doesn't, they're chastised. They feel like an outcast or a misfit, or they don't belong. And if we could teach kids how to learn, how to grow in their own curiosity states versus here's the curriculum we're going to teach you because this is what will give you the base foundation for society. And I get it. It's hard to try to create a structure that would be all things for everyone. And I don't have the easy answer on how to crack that nut from an education standpoint or a learning standpoint. But I believe in teaching children how to learn about what they're curious about versus downloading within them what we think that they need. Now, that said, I'm all for some base essentials. Like, we got to teach basic math. We got to teach some basic fundamental living attributes. But do we need to get into a lot of the things that schools teach children today? I don't know about that question specifically, but I do think that children aren't taught how to be curious and learn. If anything, think about all the times that they're told no, and they can't do things. And no, you shouldn't do that. And no, you can't do this. And we're putting them through a structure that's disempowering them and hoping that they pop out on the other side in the casted mold that we think they need, that then fits into the rest of the labels and systems. So it's not easy to break out of, but I'm very passionate on teach kids how to learn, not become educated. It's not about downloading what we think that they need. It's teaching them how to explore curiosity, and then allow them to explore the things that are passionate for them in life. And they will naturally, I think, learn along that path as they're given the opportunity to do so. So there needs to be a paradoxical shift of some type, in my opinion, for how we educate, because I'm not for not doing it, but I'm for finding a better way than what I think the current process is.
And I think more people are finding different ways to educate their children. And COVID has kind of, in that sense, pushed parents. They're starting to see what their kids are really learning and going, what is this?
Exactly.
Why are we doing this? And so that, I think, has helped to push that forward and make people challenge the current systems and say, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to do it. And the other thing is, the internet has truly made it easier, I think, for people to learn. Like, the internet's become a teacher. And if you're curious, you pretty much can learn anything. And the problem that occurs is, if I spend a couple hours on YouTube, I can probably learn more than the teacher knows.
Yeah, exactly.
In a particular niche of a subject. And so that's changing. Well, that's changing the power paradigm too. And we're starting to see that happen throughout education, and hopefully it continues. We shall see how many people are willing to get off the path and try something new.
Yeah, and just think about that. You called out a very key point, and this is not to necessarily go down conspiratorial channels, but there are people who want to stay in power. Okay, I mean, you can believe what you want to believe about different societal structures, but old patterns die hard, right? And when it comes to making shifts and changes, it's not easy, meaning that there's some people who don't want the current process to change because it's been set up that way. We've been operating that way. And when you move into an unknown realm, it becomes uncharted territory. There's a little bit of nervousness about that. But if you think about the people who have set up the structure on how it's set up now, there's a lot of massive foundations that benefit from how the structure is set up. And that's just a fact. And you can believe what you want to believe about it. But when it comes to staying in power, people don't like to give it away. Very generally speaking, they like to hold on to that money, power, control, because it's helped them create the lifestyle that they want. And I'm not here to decide what's right and what's wrong. There's a lot of unknowns I'm not sure of either. I just know this, that if we could get to a place where enough is enough and we could spread the wealth around, then that would be a monumental shift too. And I teach a lot about that, getting out of the materialistic mindset of, hey, have nice things. Life's meant to be lived, but you don't need to have everything and be afraid to give, let loose of it. But we do have some of those societal problems that we're trying to battle through right now. And it is beginning to shift and change. So we'll see what the future brings. I tend to think more of those things are good things personally, but I am an optimist by nature. So,
and that's a mindset, right?
It is.
Optimism.
Yes,
and
it is.
We decide to look, and you can look at everything through that lens, and it's a choice. You've kind of touched on this, and I know in the book you say everything is energy. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes. So when you look at what science has taught us, and there are many different experiments done over time that try to debunk this thing called the field, the Higgs boson particle, if you want to call it that, in 2012 was probably the monumental breakthrough that gave science something fundamentally factual to actually put out there that says this thing does exist. They called it the God particle. But we always knew it. But science is very, very practical in a sense that they won't put it out there or put their stamp of approval on it until they have absolute evidence that it does exist. We already knew that protons, neutrons, and electrons and atoms existed. But in terms of saying that everything is energy, we needed to have scientific proof of it. So whenever you have things like the double slit experiment, and those listening can go research these actual facts for themselves to find the evidence that says when you observe particles, they behave differently. So one of the examples that I have in the book, you had Einstein talk about spooky action at a distance. That's how he explained why some particles respond differently whenever they are observed versus not observed. It didn't sit well with him in terms of physics. But when you start to study quantum mechanics and quantum physics and quantum theories, you begin to see that everything is intertwined. So when you say everything is energy, it's just vibrating at a different pace, either faster or slower. And I'm no physicist, okay? As I spit all of these things out right now, I wasn't yes, I was interested in science, but it was through the research and trying to fact check this stuff myself to say I could speak intelligently to it, to prove it and put it in a book. I had to understand it. And what it comes down to is everything in the universe, from outer space to the planets to where we sit on Earth, is full of these atoms. And depending upon the speed of which they vibrate, creates matter. All things that we see, feel, and touch, and even taste have some component of matter within it. It's just that they are operating at a slower, denser level. When you speed things up, you get to a point of not being able to see them. So the physical eye and ear can only perceive so many sounds and sights. But we've learned that there are different spectrums of sound and sight that we can't see that absolutely still do exist. So all of that stuff is happening around us that we just don't always see. And the last point I'll make on it, and the example I always give, is it's like the radio stations. Just because you don't have the radio turned on and tuned to 96.7 FM or whatever your favorite station is, if you still listen to the radio today, doesn't mean that that radio wave still isn't being beamed from tower to tower. You just don't see them. You hear them whenever you attune into it. And life works a lot of the same way with your mind. Your mind is that radio tower that is tuned in or tuned out of those frequencies. But make no mistake about it, energy is permeating your physical existence, whether you know it or not. So back to the point I was saying earlier about what you consume, from food to information to content, all that stuff is feeding your body energy, and all things are energy. Science has proven this from all life forms on Earth. Even the inanimate objects, rocks and trees, have an energy component to them that just vibrates at a different frequency than what we do. So that is scientific fact. Everybody listening can go do their own research on it. I'll give one more point that I just can't help but say because I love these kinds of conversations. I don't remember his name. He is a Japanese doctor. There's a famously known water test that when you take water and you play hatred, disgusting, loud, obnoxious music around it and freeze it, the patterns are very disjointed and resemble the same kind of energy or frequency that are being given around it. Whenever you play beautiful, loving, compassionate, harmonic tones and freeze the water, it turns into these beautiful snowflake style patterns that are symmetrical with that are found in nature across all different kinds of things put underneath microscopes and different levels of what life forms are. So there's this proof of how we interact with the environment is how it dictates the outcome of the energy that we're interacting with. And by the way, the last time I checked, the human body is made up of 70% water. So think about that for a moment in terms of what you're doing to yourself with the energy and frequencies that you're consuming and putting into your life. So that is what I mean in a more long drawn out answer of everything is energy.
It is. And it's kind of an awareness of that. I'm just amazed that I can go outside and stand in front of the sun and the thing is so far away and yet it can still warm me, right? It puts off that much heat and yet it still doesn't burn the place down. There's this perfect balance. And the same thing, I can stand outside and the wind blows and it can knock me over and I can't even see it, right? It's like there's nothing there, but yet there's something there and it's quite powerful.
They were testing for this. This is in the book also, back in the late 1800s, this thing called the ether wind. Scientists back then thought that stuff that you're talking about had to have some kind of movement or motion, kind of like water moves or how air moves. They thought that the field or the ether had to have some kind of movement to it. Well, because they couldn't prove that there was movement, it was dubbed a failure. But again, to my earlier point, finally, 100 or so years later in 2012, we had the technology to prove that there is this field out there. It's not known as the ether field anymore. Scientists will laugh people off the stage, or if anybody tries to say ether wind, because that was debunked in the 1800s. But this new Higgs boson particle in the Higgs field is what science now points to. So it is there. We just don't see it.
Very true. So let's talk about change. And what I find is everybody else looks around and says, I want the world to change. But they never look in the mirror and say, I want to change. Love to hear your thoughts.
The way that all goodness and change will come is by people doing their own internalization and not waiting for the external forces to help them with that. The most empowering thing that you can do if you want change on a large scale basis, or you want to see change occur in your life, or even collectively as a consciousness, is to begin with you. And I talk to my family about this. I talk to my close loved ones about this, and anybody who will listen. No one's coming to save you in terms of this outside force or help. Unfortunately, as much as I believe that we are interconnected as a society, we're just not that important as what we think that we are. And I've learned that over the time too, that although I pride myself in my work, I pride myself in my own ungraduation, the removal of the bad and bringing in the good and constantly improving. No matter how great I think I am, nobody else probably really cares that much. We are still a very self-centered society who cares about them. So if you really want more of something in your life, you got to go out there and give that same thing too. I believe that, hey, if you change your mindset towards a service towards others, the things in your life will begin to change. If we can get off of this me, now, I want kind of lifestyle and look to how we serve others and bring goodness in their lives, our lives improve too. And I know that's hard for some people because not everybody's in a position in life where they can have the affordability to do that. But it's not always about affordability. I'm talking about smiling. I'm talking about giving people good comments. You don't have to give monetary value everywhere you go and throw around money. But try to answer your question. Change always begins with you. All right. Do the work. You have to look yourself in the mirror. I guess there are some components perhaps of luck and having good fortune, but I even think those are created by your own mindset, that the good fortune and luck comes your way by how you're choosing to live with intent every single day. So if you want change, it does begin with you. And if you want goodness in your life, give more of that kind of attitude, again, not monetary means, to others. And you're going to find, whether you want to believe it's like attracts like and the energy of the law of attraction type of teaching, or if you just implant yourself around others that are going to reciprocate that same feeling that you like, you're going to notice more of those things in your life. But change has to begin with you. If you are sitting there saying you want change, but you're not looking at yourself in the mirror, you are deceiving yourself. And it's like anything else in life. You have to admit you have a problem first before you can solve the problem. And in terms of change, that's where it begins. You have to look yourself in the mirror and do that internalization, that personal hard work And that philosophical challenging of your mind and your beliefs to say, what have I been misled on? What can I do better? How can I change? And where do I begin? But it has to start there.
What do we do with the inner chatter that comes along with that change, right? Because the mind doesn't want to change.
No, it wants to keep us very safe and locked in our little comfort zones. And that's the ego, I think. And again, ego is not that pompous. It's not always that pompous, outgoing aspect. But, change is something that will take time, right? It's not something that happens immediately. And that's another thing that people have to realize is that the mindset's not going to happen overnight. Okay. You can get the mindset going. The change won't come to you immediately. But in order to grow, you must get past the comfort zone, get out of the ego, brush it aside. The inner chatter that's going to be there, that self-doubt, listen to it. Don't allow it to define you. I think that's a big difference. Become the observer of thought. You're not going to ever stop the inner chatter, okay? But I like to say it this way. I become the observer of thought because behind who I am, again, is consciousness. And consciousness is the program that allows us to take action. So I like to, and this can get, again, philosophically deep, but if you do some of this kind of work, it's almost like watching a movie screen. For me, I define it as watching a movie screen. So as my thoughts come across my mind, I can choose the ones I want to adopt and choose the ones I want to cancel. Just like you're flipping through Netflix. Just because something is the number one most trending movie in America today on Netflix does not mean you have to watch it. You can keep scrolling and choose which one you want to tune into. So a lot of the self-improvement and the removal of that inner chatter happens from becoming the observer of your own thoughts. So being able to pause in the moment, and how you work on this is, again, every day is a test. Every fresh new day we have is like a fresh new day to see how you respond. So whenever those moments of frustration happen, those moments of self-doubt, you're facing a stressful situation, you get to choose in that moment of how you respond. You get to observe your thought and say, what's the best response to this? Do I allow it to hook, line, sinker me in and carry me off the edge? Or do I take a deep breath, step back, collect myself, and take the proper action that is control? Become the watcher of the pendulum swing. Don't be riding the pendulum, which is what everybody does, because highs and lows will happen. It's a part of life. It's part of the principle of polarity. I talk a lot about Hermeticism and the Hermetic teachings and the 7 principles that are within those teachings. And one of them is polarity, meaning that everything has opposites. Life is going to be a pendulum swing. We have to learn how to observe it, allow our emotions to take effect, but realize we still have free will choice in how we respond. So again, it's kind of philosophical, it's kind of deep, but by doing this kind of work, it's like mental alchemy. That's what this stuff really is. It's mental alchemy and learning how to respond, observe your thoughts, and then realize the benefit that does in so many ways for you, from a harmonization of life, peace of mind, less anxiety, overall health and wellness, success and money. It all comes from those things.
One of the things that you talk about in the book is one of my favorite ways to live, which is the Japanese term of Ikaguy. And it's basically being in alignment, doing what you love. So I think it's Warren Buffett's book, Tap Dancing to Work. Life becomes fun and enjoyable, and work no longer becomes a 4-letter word. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I came across this again as one of those major life-changing moments. And I know that Ikaguy has been westernized. A life coach at some point in time found it, thought it was a great model to teach, but it actually originated as the Japanese reason for being. Okay. And they started off with, what's their one purpose for getting out of bed every day? It could be to farm their land to the best of their ability to feed their family. And that's what gave them personal satisfaction. So it's been westernized in our world to try to teach a life set of rules that would be in perfect balance, perfect life harmony. So you have your vocation in terms of what you're meant to do. That vocation has a meeting world need or community need or circle of influence that you can make impact with. You can be paid for it. And oh, by the way, you love doing it. So it's a great model in terms of overall life harmony. And life harmony meaning I am living my passion, I'm getting paid for it, and the world needs it. And dang it, I'm good at doing it. So it's taking those 4 elements and applying them to your life. Now, when I teach about this, I tell people it is often, if you're listening to this, you're going to say, well, I may like my job. I don't love it. It may, or maybe you love the money that your job gives you, but you don't like doing it. Maybe you do like doing it and you're getting good money, but you have this hollowness inside for wanting to have more purpose. There are ways to intersect that into your life without changing a whole lot. So if you're in a job that you like and make good money, but you're not really getting the impact in a purposeful way, maybe you help your company start up a nonprofit, or you make a community impact that you're passionate about, that you bring to that company. So it is about analyzing where you're at. And in some rare instances, you may have to make change. You may come to the realization that you are in the wrong walk of life and you have to make a career or job change. But I don't advocate that people just go out and make wholesale changes without giving themselves some real good analytical thought to all the life elements of where they stand and what they can do currently to make that harmonization and balance work. Because what a great place it would be if people could wake up and be passionate about what they do every day. And I'm pretty close to that. It's not perfect, but I love what I do because I get to influence people on many different levels, many different times throughout every single day. And that's where I fill my cup. And I am able to make good money doing that. And I love it. And I know in my heart that it's helping me make impact in the lives of others. So that's where we're all striving for. And not everybody is probably there right now, but I would encourage anybody, yes, it's in the book, but do some homework and some research on Ikaguy. It is a great model to just print and post and be reminded of in terms of what you want your life to be like.
And I very much concur with you. It makes life fun. And the faster you can get there, the longer you get to enjoy it, I guess, right? So it's a big part of doing that. Make sure that you have clarity in life and where you're going and what you want out of it, which kind of brings us to the next question, and something we always like to get people to do, which is to take an action step. What's something people can do this week to move forward in their lives?
I'll give you a couple real quick ones. And
okay.
The first one really is to take a look at your life right now. And if I can advocate one thing first, look at anything that doesn't make sense to you. What belief system are you carrying that you didn't create that may have been downloaded upon you, right? Did that come from your family? Did that come from education? Did that come from your job? Did that come from your friends? What is one area in your life that you feel like you may be living and following that you haven't really sought to understand why? It could be about any one topic of life. It could be about money, it could be about spirituality, it could be about freedom, you name it. It could be about politics. Find something that you're just going along with because you feel like you're a part of a tribe, and really ask yourself, why do I believe this? Is it my core belief, or have I been told that this is the way that it is? Have I been fit into a box unknowingly? And if you can find any one of those aspects, that's starting point number one. And then I teach this simple meditation that can be done for 5 minutes, no more, no less. You can do it in the morning, afternoon, in the evening, to where if you want to explore areas of life that can be brought into more harmony, if you want more abundance, if you want more truth in your life, if you want more guidance, I believe in what's called the mind-heart connection. So the mind is a tool, but we're so reactive to it. And what I teach is that the mind gives off energy and vibrates at a certain level of hertz. So does the heart. People are learning that the heart has even more sensory components and even a larger field of influence in our lives. So if you can pull yourself out of your brain and connect to your heart, and how this works is you take 5 minutes and you get yourself into a emotional state of love, compassion, gratitude, and you harmonize from your head to your heart. You just think about what it is you need guidance in your life with, and you put it down to your heart. And what happens for me is that whenever I do this, the things that open up that feel right for me, I feel lighter in my heart. I feel this sensation of this feels right. So I'm able to kind of go after it and at least decide if it's an avenue I should pursue. When I feel it's a no, there's this denseness, this heaviness kind of in my gut that says almost that like pit in your stomach, like that doesn't feel right. So I teach this meditation of the mind-heart synchronization that can help you attune to be more open to possibilities, whether that's around information around your belief sets that you need more guidance on, if it's about your careers or any level of lack that you have in your life right now that you want to change. Meditation may not be your thing, but it's 5 minutes of just trying to synchronize head to heart so that we don't get so reactionary with our mind. So there's more information on that in the book, of course, go check it out. But those are a couple of things to start off with that can really make a lot of improvement in your life today and every day if you put them into practice.
And I think that's a great action step that people can do to move forward this week.
I hope so.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Well, it's mindset. I will tell you that, and it's not a secret. But in my learning, everything comes from the abundance mindset and getting yourself out of that theory of you're not enough or that life has to be a struggle. So back to the beginning of our conversation, we talked about money and this thought of it needing to be very hard to attain. I have found out by shifting my mindset that money comes to me. I have enough of it. I will continue to have enough of it. And I'm okay spending it whenever I need to. I'm okay letting go of it if it's for the right reasons. It's this fear of thinking you never have enough. So to live more abundantly, you have to become abundant. And that's why I don't love personal affirmations to say, I will be rich or I will hit the lottery. That's not how it works. You have to think yourself abundantly every day. And it doesn't have to be about money. If you have not enough of something right now, I know it's hard to put yourself in the mindset that you are that thing now, but think about the abundance that you do have. Could be your health, could be your family, could be your loved ones, could be something in your life that you're so gracious for. Lean into that abundance and watch abundance come more into your life every day. So it is a mindset, and I am not a blind optimist. I am a real optimist, in meaning that I know that there are challenges out there in life, but if you shift your thinking towards more of what you already have a lot of and you will continue to have enough of, think of it like air. You never run out of air unless you're in water or in a vacuum somewhere in space. There's always enough air. Look at your life like there's always going to be enough. And I know it sounds woo-woo, but it really does work whenever you frame it up that way. That's what abundance is. It's a mindset. And if you can fix that, get out of lack, you'll have more abundance.
That is so true. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Probably that, we are in a system that likes to keep us indoctrinated. It's why I wrote the book. It's one of the big reasons why. If I could have figured this stuff out whenever I was 16, 17, and 18, I would not have been as fearful. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just blown by the winds of change. I didn't want to drop out of high school. I did. It was one time I ran away in my life, and then I had to carry all the weight and pressure of not being a statistic and not being a failure and putting all the pressure and stress and anxiety on me in my early 20s and mid 20s that led to some health problems. I didn't get into this with you, but briefly, I'll just tell you, I had high cholesterol, high blood pressure. My doctor today tells me that all those things are the best numbers he's seen from a person that he'll probably see in this community where I live all year long. But it's because I had to realize that the pressures that I'm placing on myself are self-induced, and that of society telling us how it thinks that we need to live. Your health, that thing that we call disease, is created by anxiety that is self-perpetuated by your own thoughts because of allowing others to tell you what you need to be. So it's not just, a self-promotion of my book here. It really is a way of life that I want others to realize you don't need to live that way. You'll be happier, healthier, and better for it. I wish I knew it because I wouldn't have struggled in my 20s. And maybe I would be further ahead right now with my own health, my own well-being. Thankfully, because we're always changing every year, Rocky, we can start over. We don't got to go back to our 20s. We can redefine our 20s and our 40s, which is where I'm at right now. So that's what I would have changed if I could have. I'm glad I know it now, but I didn't always know it then.
It's too often we learn later in life, right? That's when wisdom comes. If we can teach kids this sooner, it would be much better. Which kind of leads to our next questions. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would tell that 18-year-old to lean into their passions in life. What is it that excites them? And go after those passions. And really, that alone. Parents, God bless them, want the best for their kids. I get that. They want them to have great jobs. They love all their kids to be lawyers and doctors and have these great paying positions. That causes undue stress and anxiety too, because children are then 18-year-olds are taken out of their zones of geniuses, and then they fall into that life of mediocrity. And they may make good money one day, but it may not be in their life passions. And the second thing I'd say, if I could add on one more bonus point, is that life is not defined by materialistic gains. Yes, the world functions on money, but early on in my life, I was exposed to, thankfully, a lot of good people who I had never seen in my life that had a lot of nice things. So it helped motivate me to want nice things, but I chased those nice things as my modality of what success looked like: titles and nice things. Then I started to get a lot of those things in my late 20s and 30s and realized I have enough. If I get more, great. I'll use the resources to help others. So go after your passion and don't let anybody deter you from that, and realize that success is defined differently. It's not always money and things. If you realize that, you're going to be a lot happier, a lot healthier, a lot more abundant with money and resources that then you can do what you want with, hopefully good things, and help others be served through that outcome.
Excellent advice. If people would like to learn more about you, your book, your programs, what's the best way for them to do that?
Definitely go to ungraduated.com. As we speak right now, we're retooling the website. By the time this airs, it will be redone. You'll have not only a great blog to read, you'll have information on the book, the podcast, which is Ungraduated Living and Learning, is there. It's on the website, as well as all the major podcast listening apps of your choice. So if you want to learn more about Ken Hannaman, what I teach, what I talk about, ungraduated.com is the hub of where everything will be housed, from the book, podcast, services, and resources. Ungraduated.com is the best place to go.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for having me.
How do you define your I am? What words do you use? And are you aware of them? I'll admit, I'm probably deaf to some of the things I say. If you hear me say something and need to call me out, please do. I appreciate it. Figuring out what you want in life and taking a different path is where you will find what you truly desire. Because you built it. You didn't follow somebody else. This week's action step: take a look at your life and what doesn't make sense to you. Where did these beliefs come from? And do they serve you? It's funny, most of our beliefs are running because we were taught them as kids. And many times we don't challenge them. I've reinvented myself multiple times in my life, and there's nothing stopping you from becoming the better version of you. In the Harvard Grant study, they followed men from college all the way through their entire lives into their 80s and maybe 90s. And you'll see every decade how much change occurred. And they weren't even aware of that. They were literally opposites in some of their beliefs. You get to drive the change for your next decade. It's up to you. Figure out what you want. By the way, if you enjoyed this episode or know somebody who'd benefit from it, would you do me a favor and share it with them? Next week, we've got Xander Sprague. He talks about epic, and it all begins with one step forward. It's powerful, and he's got an emotional backstory. I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week. outro music.